All right. So in front of me, I have the it's by ClimateGuard. So it's on Tendi. It's a Russian group, and they've made a pretty cool piece of kit here. I will say the assembly could have been better documented. There was a QR code that came with the device. The QR code on back actually is a little better. It takes you to a Russian page. Google Translate was fine. As you can see, most of the components are block, so there's not really a whole lot of soldering even needed for this kit. The GM tube dosimeter was already a pre-surface mount done, so like I literally just plugged a cord into it, and then this was simply mounting components. This was a very easy assembly. The longest part and the most time-consuming part was I didn't have instructions, and maybe they're going to fix this on the GitHub for programming this SB. So loading that up was not terrible. It just took, I had to figure out what board it was, and it's a clone or whatever, but, get that done. I found the code. It was listed under an examples folder, which was confusing. So the Dosimeter project is on GitHub. This entire project is not like in its own folder. There's just a EDU, like educational EDU example, and it had the source code for this guy. Loaded that on, had to get some libraries for the OLED display and also for the rad board stuff. So there's they were available inside the Arduino library search. It found them. That was no problem. So anyhow, all that being said, this is a cool device. I did change some of the acrylic font to English, so the units were, well, I can't pronounce it obviously. There was a acrylic version of micro-roentgens an hour. I made that say micro-roentgens an hour, so it's URH. So what I have here is an aircraft display. This is an old radium-painted dial compass. Got this in a estate sale. It's nice and hot. It's hotter than anything I've gotten. It's good gamma too. So I'm going to set it off over here. And the metal on this acts as a really good shield. So I'll power this guy up. You will still get some counts even at that distance. And so if you download the initial firmware, you're just going to see this in some Russian thing. And stat is going to be something in Russian, but it's in English here. So with every count, you're going to have a flash on the dosimeter board. It's named a dosimeter board. It's just basically a GM tube, right? And this isn't really even a dosimeter because it's not giving me like a total dose. It's giving me a stat is like an averaged dose over time period, and then this is instantaneous calculated. The battery charging board down here has some LEDs on it, so when it's charging, it'll go red. When it finishes charging, it'll go blue. And of course, there's an LED on the SB, so when you program it or when you turn it on, it flashes blue for a bit. I changed the battery. There was a Russian battery in it. I mean, it's very nice of them to include a lithium-ion battery, but I'm silly about batteries. I prefer to have them. So this Streamlight battery has a built-in integral protection circuit in the cap. So if this circuit from China attempts to overcharge the battery, it would not let that happen. It has an electronic fuse, which I would highly recommend. So anyhow, that's why it has a Streamlight battery, not the Russian battery that it shipped with. I'm sure I'll use the Russian battery for a flashlight. I just don't trust this Chinesium charging circuit, which, by the way, has worked just fine. I don't have any issues with it, so just I don't trust it. So you see 6.8 micro-roentgen an hour. I'm going to take, and I'm going to move our Geiger counter, or move our source right here next to the GM tube. And so I think it's every 10 count increase, we get the triple beep, which is interesting because it actually interrupts the counting for a bit. So as it does the beep sequence, it's like it slows down the count. So you see the dosimeter is beeping like crazy there. And what's happening is the circuit for this, there's like a SPI bus. I'm assuming it's SPI. I looked, there's a bus between the screen and the dosimeter board that are shared on this chip. So again, I'm lazy and I didn't bother reading all their stuff because it's in Russian. I had to translate all of it, but I'm assuming it's a SPI bus between these two, and they're both sharing the same bus. So I don't know if drawing the display and collecting the counts causes some noticeable latency, but when you expose it to a hot source like this, you notice how the LED stops between samples. It's almost like it samples for a bit and then tries to do computation and update the screen. Which normally you're not putting it in front of a gamma source like this, but if I was to get picky and be like, oh my goodness, there's an issue, like that would be the only one I'd mention. I honestly, I love this device. This is going to be a new favorite for me. I think this might actually be, I don't feel bad carrying this around outside versus, my nice Gamma Scout I don't want to damage. or any of my other Geiger counters. Like, this feels cheap enough and portable enough, and I have backup tubes. A bit harder to find now with the conflict going on in Ukraine, but I have backup tubes. This, I forget the name. This is a standard GM tube from, it's actually most often on eBay from Ukraine. But yeah, I have no problem replacing that if it gets broken or something. And then this is pretty darn indestructible, honestly, the way that it's been assembled. And it's very simple block modular components, and I haven't checked how long the battery's going to last with this kit, but I'm sure it'll last some time. So anyhow, great kit, would highly recommend. ClimateGuard, awesome job on this product. Documentation could definitely be better. Programming instructions were non-existent. Of course, I was trying to translate Russian pages, so it's very possible I missed a link somewhere. And that might not be on them, right? And again, it's a Russian project. It's very well done, very well put together. A lot of my problems probably came from the fact that I'm a native English speaker and I don't speak Russian. But I do want to thank the team that put time and effort into building such a cool, easy-to-use tool. I would love to see better documentation on the GitHub. And that is something like if you get the project, just be expecting, if it's a first time for you working with anything, I'd highly recommend you try to get yourself familiarized with the SB32, get the Arduino suite for programming on your computer, and then you should be good. As long as you got the Arduino IDE, you'll be just fine. So that's all I have for this. It was a really fun project. I'm happy to have yet another Geiger counter. It is not a dosimeter. Again, it calls itself a dosimeter. This is not doing time logging. Reading the instructions, it was like my first dosimeter. I was like, oh, cool, it's going to give me a dose rate over time. And I figured maybe there'd be some buttons or something, but there's none of that. It just is showing me, calculated dose and then a statistical calculated dose over a longer period, right? So it's smoothing out the jumps. So this is going to be more instantaneous, and the one below is sort of an average to median dose calculated over a very short period. So anyhow, there you go. That's the thing. Updating the screen was really easy. I just changed the wording. So instead of like whatever weird Russian it was, I changed it to "you are an hour." I tried doing the micro with the weird micro U that has a tail on it, and the character set for this OLED library did not handle that very well. It was not happy. So further improvement if somebody wants to make that. So there you go. Really cool thing. Awesome project. Highly recommend.